David,
Hey, Michael.
I'm just accepting this. Okay. Okay.
Good stuff. So, how you been?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Oh,
Is
very
he with
good.
a tour still?
Yeah, working the tour, getting ready. All right, well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining me again. My name is David Whitehead, your host, and we are continuing this epic journey of the path of the fool with researcher, author Michael Tsarion, and his website is michaeltsarion.com, and you can find more about what I'm working on at modernknowledge.ca. And so it's an honor, Michael, to have you here again and to discuss this awesome card, the Strength card, card number 8. Which is interesting. I want to get into that number, why it is the number 8, and some other points as well. But I found that actually it was interesting timing that for me personally, on my path of the fool journey, that this was the card that you focused on at this time. I feel personally that just due to the amount of work and amount of things going on in my personal life, that strength has been something, and a very particular kind of strength has been something that has been needed for me personally to keep me going, keep me pushing. And with your description and deep analysis of this concept of strength and courage and, this card and what it really means, a masculine strength and feminine strength, like how these things correlate, it really brought so much out in me personally. I just wanted to say that. So it was another card that yet again really was perfect timing for me personally. So I'm really excited to do this interview with you. So thanks for taking the time with me here today.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for watching and being part of it as well. We are getting deeper. I wanted to do that. Didn't want to do a superficial take on any of these cards, especially these ones. It's important, and we've been able to do that. Get into some. There's running themes that run through them all, but courage, strength. This is a very fiery card after all. The sun. If you think about it, in both cards, the sun doesn't even appear. The physical sun in the Rider-Waite and the Thoth deck doesn't even appear, which is unusual. You'd think, since this is Leo, Mars exalted, all these fire sign, traits, and yet the sun itself is not there. There's a yellow background, I think, in the Rider-Waite, which is very significant that the sky is yellow, not blue. That certainly indicates a kind of a fieriness. But the Lust card is fiery in itself. You don't need to see the sun because this is almost like a flame. It's like the Princess of Wands. The imagery there is quite similar. The long flowing red hair of the female, absolutely stunning image artistically.
Right. Yeah.
I think if people look at that and aren't captivated, by that image alone to find out more, what do you say? It's such a stunning piece of artwork, absolutely incredible. And the whole flame-like quality of it, and the stunning image. Is this biblical? Is this the harlot? The whore of Babylon? Is this Durga? Because that image would not be as unfamiliar to people in the East, where many of the goddesses there ride the tiger, ride the lion. Innumerable gods and goddesses sit upon a pelt of a lion. The Egyptians have the lion tail. In the East, like we said, Menhit and Tefnut and Bast and all of that, Sekhmet. And as I say, in the East, you've got your Durgas and Kalis. So in the East, it would be familiar, which tells me that Crowley had spent years himself in the East, in India, studying pranayama and other forms of yoga. So it's obvious that in the book that he composed, for Lady Frida Harris to draw upon, there was definitely some Eastern influence in this card particularly. You may not see that in any of the other cards, but I think their focus here was on mandalas, Indian artwork. Definitely something about the feminine principle, the tantric principle, as coming out of the Aryan, tradition in the East. That's really conspicuous in this card. But of course, people can find it a little bit odd. Things associated with that card is, why is a female even in it? This is a male card, Leo card. So that's already something they're giving you a little apostrophe to ask a deeper question. Whereas the previous cards in France and Italy had been a man, there wielding a club, So that's a little odd. Why move the card? That's odd. Why rename the card? That's odd. So right. People who've been studying the tarot kind of come to the strength card and go, oh yeah, okay. It's kind of weird. Move on. Because they couldn't explain it. You can't explain Crowley's mind easily.
Yeah.
And I tried to in the show. I said in the program, I said, no, he was a trickster. He definitely said, let's separate the sheep from the goats here. let me move these cards, it's like putting a man in drag, and then setting him out into the world, so that any fool can see, the beard,
Yeah.
the shadow, and all. What is this, But yeah, well, then decode it, right? So the fool tradition, the trickster tradition, this is the path of the fool, after all. And the fool is also Loki. The fool is also the trickster, right? So, he's the magus, but he's the trickster. And Crowley played both of those two extremes. Today we'd look back and say, oh, he was crazy. No, he was the fool, and he's not the only one. You have Swinburne, the poet. You have Shelley. You have Rabelais. You've got so many characters of that era that one could mention who were a little cuckoo, But it was just because they were fighting the restraints of the age in which they were, the straitjacket of the age, especially when it came to religion. So Crowley was one of these people. If you look at his chart, you'll see this. He was born on the 12th of October, a Libra, but when you really get down into his chart, you see that he had this trickster quality. So that's what he did. He switched these cards just to see what kind of an idiot will go along thinking that, Leo is Libra and Libra is Leo. Let's see if anybody can work that simple one out. Maybe he was guided to do it, or again, just this trickster quality, which is not as foreign in our world as one might think. Fraternities do it, don't they? When they haze you and
Right.
mess you about. The military does it when it even, trains you with live ammunition or, explosions to test your mettle. The MI5 will do it to set up fake scenario, James Bond scenarios, to test the loyalty and the real adrenaline before the real operatives have to go in the field. I would be certain that secret societies are known to have done it, where there's all these rites and rituals to test for strength and to test for loyalty, and to Brotherhood of the Bell brings that out in a way, that movie, that before one goes into the real world.
I've seen it across in dojos that I've been in. It's the same environment there, where it's sort of like, okay, you want to train this, let's see what you've got, and that's how you pull out information about that student, so you know what to work on. It's kind of the
Isn't it interesting? And that's exactly what he did with the tarot. He was going to leave a mark. He was going to say, I'm not just, I'm putting this out to the world. He was very much he was very much libertarian in that mode. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but there was a prolonged court case between him and Maythers and the Golden Dawn, because Crowley was literally, in his magazine, it was called the Equinox magazine, he was printing the secrets of the society, actually. Now, and that does a lot of things. What it does is it shows you he wasn't a favor too much of secret societies, which again, people who hate Crowley don't know any of these things. He actually published the secrets of the Golden Dawn openly because he believed that all men should have the knowledge. I mean, why when it comes to Crowley anyway, we know that they'll just defame him and not a single good trait, even though he had many of them. And I'm not a Crowleyite. I'm not a Crowley follower. And personally, he was a little bit too eccentric for me personally, but that I'm open-minded enough to say he's not the only one, as I say before, that was like that. There were people even far more wild and crazy than he done after he lived and at his time, and they weren't half the genius that he was. But the thing was that he also then made a stand against, this overt secrecy. But at the same time, when the Thoth deck went out, he knew that, I'm making it public. It's for everyone. The law is for all, as one of his great quotes was. But at the same time, I'm going to put a few light traps in there for the intelligent person to say, look, mate, there's no way in the world that those two cards should be switched. I mean, just no way. And those who go along with the way his deck is oriented, are still exoteric. They haven't cracked it at all. And he put that in, and he put a few other things in, minor ruses, traps, whatever you want to call it, just to separate the sheep from the goats. And as I said, it's quite a common thing in our world, so it's not that he was the only one. And when you know about his personality more and more, he laced his poetry with things like that. He probably played a lot of pranks. He was a bit of a prankster, and he did it in the deck, actually. So my advice to people is just to take a white out, and change the 11 card back to 8 and the 8 back to 11, and shift the cards in position and move on. And you'll find that, it'll be smooth from that point.
It makes a lot more sense at that point, I guess. And you've done a great article on your website, michaeltsarion.com, about Aleister Crowley, for those that want to learn more about some of those aspects that they're not maybe familiar with. I know that when you go on the forums online, it mainly comes from a lot of the more fundamentalist camps and whatnot, where they just demonize him as being, he's the beast, he's the Satanist, he's the dark, magician, and all these kinds of things. But who knows if some of those aspects might have been part of it or part of the game he was playing. But still, it's interesting that we have to look at all the information that's coming out from people that are bringing this forward, and there's a lot of disinformation out there as well that needs to be taken into account.
Yeah, there is. And so, like this whole stuff about him being an MI5 agent and all, I mean, that's just dreamt up by a lot of authors who couldn't find enough dirt on him, so they made some more to sell their books,
Yeah.
One should, he was a bit of a kook, and he did some things that were, not very nice or whatever, but on the whole, I think they're minor. And there's a good book out called Legend of Aleister Crowley. If people are seriously interested in balancing the books on him, to at least know the other side, his love poetry is unknown mostly to the world right now. Again, these people who are trying to defame him purposely don't want you to be reading his deeper work. Amongst his poetry, his love poetry to his wife, to his dead daughter, things like that, to show the human side of him that will never be presented, has not been presented by any detractor. And this is absolutely scandalous. You wouldn't do that with a famous person, in the way that this sort of a gutter journalism is what you're reading. And as you say, these extremists from the evangelical side, well, they're right. From their point of view, yeah, he was the devil's own, yeah, from their point of view. But then you got to take into consideration what evils have been done by them and in their name. And then you see that Crowley's nothing. He's a joke compared to the evils that have been done in these people's names.
Right. Well, another thing that's interesting about this card you brought up in the video was that it essentially, it's got 3 names. It's, as far as I know, I'm not sure if there's more, but it's strength, and it's been known as lust. There's also force, or la force, and you kind of go through how all these work together. It's interesting that lust is one of the names of the card, because I would have never correlated strength and lust. But you brought out a very interesting point about lust and different kinds of lust. Like there's the more hedonistic type, and then there's something else that's more linked to your natural desire and things like that. Did you have any more comments on the naming of the card?
I think he wanted to get away from the more limited idea of just physical strength. He probably worked with that and said, look, every time you use that word strength in English, it does represent muscles and shifting big logs or something like that, and this is not the way that he wanted. He wanted to show, and even just as I said before, the introduction of the female character, which had already been there, and he kept that. So there, he was talking about then a strength that is not just necessarily of man and muscle, of brawn. It's subtle. It's a kind of, remember, the sun isn't in it, because if you put the sun in a picture, just like you did with a fool, it's a fairly static image. He wanted to show I wouldn't say the heart of the sun, that comes later when you're dealing with cards like Aeon and stuff like that, but he wanted to show the active principle of fire. And he did right there, but he wanted to show those sunspots. He wanted to show the flame, which can be in women as much as it is in men. Even towards the end of the program, I talked about the fact that even our heart sense of I-ness, right, because this is a Leo card, remember, a fire card, which deals entirely in personality, personal identity, perhaps even temperament, the roots of our being. That's all included in this card. But let's even just say character, personality. Yeah, but so why the woman in it again? That's the accent that always brings you back to not looking on the surface of the thing, but looking within. It was women who were the first self-surveyors. And then from that came a hardening of our identity. So a thing we would concern ourselves, I think, is very masculine, right? Is in fact something that started amongst women. Men then took it on, and men have the same thing in a male way, but the root of it, right? And this is probably why there's an image of the female there, because Crowley, his people, anyone who studied deeply knows that we've been told a pack of lies about personality, about how things came into being, about the child-mother relationship, that so much of the child's personality is going to be based on the mirroring of the mother. The mother's the keeper of the ego identity of the child. So when she's giving the identity back to the child, that will come with her own character traits and personality, all of these things that we are not thinking of, and where in the series does the real male energy click in? So Crowley's got beneath the skin here. He's saying, there's definitely a masculine polarity and a masculine connotation right? A masculine correspondence to this card, but as I say, it's trivial. It's clubbing something over the head. It's carrying some logs. It's throwing some rocks. It's Achilles and Hector banging away for eternity at each other. Whatever. There's something so much more about the fire sign, about the pool of energy. Again, people who know the Crowley deck well, pull out the Princess of Wands and just look at that card. It's a flame. There's the female again with the hair and the flame. And so it's like two people sitting in chess, barely moving. The whole audience, game of snooker, everybody like mummified, right? But you're telling me there's no fire there? Oh, yeah. It's sword fencing in a suit.
It's more of a mental fire, or they're bringing that fire on and expressing it through the chessboard.
Yeah, it's war in a suit.
Yeah.
And a handshake, right? Yeah. But it's war.
Yeah.
And that is what Crowley was trying to look at, this concealed inner fire, that manifests, bubbles above the surface, on those volcanic moments. But on the whole is something that is raging within all the time. That lion, I'm sure he saw, like I've learned to see, that's the id. That's the protean core, where all the boiling is really going on. We rarely, if ever, take the lid off to look down into that abyss and say, Jesus, what's this going on? Well, all my hurts, all my resentments, all my legitimate feelings of frustration, all my will to power, all the rawness of it, all concealed and bubbling, below the grate, below the periphery of vision. And so this card, to me, is a little bit of, pulling back this giant iron lid, just to get a peep inside this, keyhole vision inside what's really boiling in the inner core of man and of the universe, the active principle.
And a lot of people mistakenly repress that, and they think of it as something that's negative. It comes out as a negative form because there's negative elements in their psyche that need to be cleansed. But that original fire that you're talking about is something we work with a lot in martial art practice, is how to cultivate that and direct it and learn about it and express it properly and in a healthy manner, and to know when to use it and know how, like strength. If it's just raw brute force and strength that has no leash on it or no training on it, it can be very destructive. But when you know how to channel it properly, when you know how to use it properly and understand what it really is all about, that's the fire of being that we look at. That's that passion, and it can be. A lot of people might feel like they lose control of that, but like you said, if you look within and you really understand what it is, we've been misinformed about that, and a lot of people, like I said, they sadly repress that.
Yeah, and then what principle is the civilizing force that has channeled it, weakened it? That's another incredible dimension of the card that fits not just with Freud, but with a lot of other people, about civilization, being feminine, being another I wouldn't say passive, but in this instance, it is certainly a force that countermands that raw, libido.
Right.
That's why I said, and the show could be, 10 hours long for each card if we were to get into the entire explanation of how that process works with the ego, the id, and the superego. I didn't want to get into all of that. It takes us off digressing into Freudianism and other comments on the civilizing. But I mean, even on a rudimentary level, as I said, we're taught to use a knife and fork. We're taught not to steal, or violate the boundaries of other people, even if you don't like them, and even if you have just cause, we still have to obey, the protocol. Partly that's selfish as well, because if we do that, then we'll be treated as we want to be treated. So there's a lot of self-interest still involved in that. But slowly, the civilizing forces, which have always been pictorialized as the female. That was an interesting thing I thought about the card, because it's so clear that that's the case. And that civilizing process has been going on not just in our modern industrial world, that's been going on, back in Egypt. People, in order to have any kind of tribal situation, although there would be war and there'd be conflict, at the same time, there was this restraining force. And it's not necessarily men, this is arguable, of course, but it's more the calming effect of the female at that point that again plays this role, because it's there and it's implicit, isn't it, in the mother-child relationship again. And when we see in today's world when a kid is running feral, and even when his brothers and sisters seem to be much more acculturated, there's always, some psychopathic kid who starts with torturing animals and moves up to being a very brutal person. This has been noted time and time again.
Yeah.
What's going on there? What's going on there is that the parents have not in some way succeeded in curtailing those urges, right? And so then society then takes over. So it's very rudimentary. You don't have to get all highbrow about it. Society then comes in and says, well, you haven't done it, so we're gonna move in there and take care of it, because this person is running wild and might even be harming themselves as well as other people, and it's simply not allowed.
Yeah.
So there's a takeover at that point.
Right, and it's also interesting that you mentioned this concept of courage and how strength can be shown from true strength can really only be shown from a place of courage. And even a person that would be weaker, you brought up the David and Goliath story and some other things to reference that, real strength and strength that's applied to leaders and people that have that ability. It's not necessarily muscular strength. It's not necessarily that physical force. It's that courage that you bring forward. It's really, I guess, just maybe another expression of that boiling cauldron you're talking about, right? Is that they were able to bring that forward, face their fear, regardless of the fact they might be the weaker person, but they brought such a strength forward that they were victorious.
And often strength can just be arbitrary. It can be there as a resource to use, but unless the courageous leader, the courageous man, directs, right, the rest of the troop or the rest of the company or the rest of the country. That's what we have today. People are talking about the fact that there's in the New World Order, it's getting stronger, and all the rest of it, and Big Brother is getting stronger, and there's all these people who hate that fact and can do something about it, but there's no channel, there's nobody sort of leading the way. So in many instances, it's the courage that is lacking. The strength is there, but it's sort of not directed properly. And you'll notice that even in history, half the time that there's been a revolution, it's been the military that have participated in the revolution. That the military, right, who is the strength, who's the courageous ones, right, the auxiliaries, as Plato would have said, they go over to the side of the people, right, the economic class, and rebel against the oppressor. So this is an instance in which this courage and strength are now focused on the same target, and radical change takes place. So the strength on its own is pretty much blind.
Yeah.
Whereas the courage is coming from an intelligence, like the metaphor I gave. And this has happened in real life where, a person meets the long lost father who abandoned the mother or whatever, 25 years ago. And now because of the internet or some other agency, the girl or whatever is going to meet her father for that first time. Absolutely agonizing. Pain is involved, emotional trauma, trepidation, eating disorder. You can't even eat for the week before. You're tied up in knots. So strength, what the hell is that? Strength is not going to, your strength. In fact, in many ways, your strength is overridden because you're meeting somebody now that is actually physically stronger than you, may have been mentally stronger than you. After all, how can a father do this? Leave his daughter? Leave the mother? That subliminally indicates a certain strength that he has that maybe I don't have, all of that. So then the actual moment of meeting requires what? It requires courage. And so, as I said, testing, say for instance, somebody is involved deeply in a sport or they're going to make a debut, playing the piano in front of, 10,000 people for the first time or whatever. It's nerve-wracking. Physical strength has got very little to do with it. Pushing the keys on the piano doesn't require physical strength. It's the courage to believe in yourself. It's the courage to say, hell, I know I'm good, or I know this is my moment to shine. I know I can pull this off. If you don't have all those self-beliefs in there, and that's not coming from physical strength, isn't it? The strength of the body is irrelevant. Right. It's the courage to walk out on stage. It's the courage to make a mistake. It's the courage to say, I'm going to give it a go. And even if I lose or fail or get ridiculed or whatever, I'll pick myself up and move on again and again and again. That is a totally different, and so Crowley was playing with both of those. It was that's what the beauty of it is, the lion and the woman, no male figure in it actually. There's a whole other question here And so Crowley was right to change the name, to shift us out of the gear of even thinking in terms of just brawn and physical strength or force, as it had been named, in a much more one-dimensional way before.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and it kind of rings a bell with me what you're talking about when you're bringing up things like, you know, the encroaching police state, the New World Order, the situation of social decay and whatnot, where we've had this a lot in Canada, and around the world, of course, but we've seen a lot of instances where you have like the police, right? They're representing the strength, they're representing the defense, and they're supposed to be there to serve and protect the citizenry, although we know they're there to really just serve and protect the oligarchy. But they're out there abusing strength. They're out there abusing, you know, old ladies and people in wheelchairs and, you know, people that are defenseless. And you see instances of people that are in those situations, and you've got some old lady chasing those guys down and showing courage in those situations. And even though they might not physically be strong, and you have someone that's abusing that strength towards you, that's the time to bring that courage forward. And that courage alone, even though physically there should be no match whatsoever, it's interesting how it shuts that other opponent down, that just by bringing that courage, that fire in your eyes, and just there's that aura that you bring forward, that is more powerful than the physical strength.
That's right. The physically weakest person can still have the great strength. This is brought out in innumerable myths. The Hobbit is one of them, of course, but there's so many others in which that plays itself out, where the weaker individual, you know, who's been undercut, like I mentioned, those movies, you know, in which a hero is really heroic because he had mightier force, a stronger man or two or three men, a gang of people beating him up, you know, throwing him to the fire and then returning from the dead. So to speak, this is what really distinguishes. And Big Brother, of course, is using just brawn. He's not using courage. It's like the serial killer metaphor that I gave. Yeah. They are the serial killer. They're the one who plucks the wings off, you know, the fly. They're the ones that are doing it to us. They're the ones who, you know, pin the butterfly to the board sadistically. And we've been under these people. And I've never believed that it takes a lot to get rid of them. I've said, we've talked about this on umpteen occasions, about the fact that we don't even have to reinvent the wheel. Every single principle that we would need to run the world in a better way has already been invented.
Right.
And Big Brother, one of its things to do is to make sure we don't read those great works of the Oswald Spenglers and, you know, the Swallow de Lubitsch's or whoever it might be, the Plato's, or, you know, I mean, the list goes on, right? But all of the economic models, all of the social models, you know, the Gustave Le Bon's, it's all been put there. It's all been created, economic models and whatever. They want to make sure that these works are buried so that we are feeling in a very, very nebulous state. They want us to feel, in fact, we've got thousands of years of thought behind us. Do you think the average school kid knows that or thinks about that as he's negotiating what we're going to do, you know, if we don't have democracy, right? Michael, what are you talking about? You know, when you talk about, you know, benign monarchy. Are you crazy? There's no such thing. Yeah. Well, I beg to differ. There was, except the malignant monarchy wiped it out. So you don't know about it.
That's right.
But come and tell me that there hasn't been, right, the benign version of it. Let's get along, move, along with those models, and I'll at least have the confidence to realize everything has been created. Our world, there's nothing new under the sun. What we've got to do is just get rid of the false religion, the false economics, the false government, right? Like Shelley said, government of itself will decay when men show that courage.
Right.
Men believe in themselves and deal with each other equally and truly. You don't need religion to goad you into that. It's just natural. And then of itself, the evils of tyranny of government will disappear. As I said, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. These are not complicated things. And I've never, ever believed that they are complicated. What I do know that if they're not coming into being, then we have to look deeper. Then we have to ask questions not about the oppressor, so to speak, but about the mind of the oppressed. Right. And that's what my work is entirely rooted in. That's why people run a mile from my work often. And only the more deeper thinking person goes, nope, you got something, I'm sticking with your work here, mate. You know, others prefer, no, just keep on telling us about the monster, right? I don't want to take no personal responsibility. It's TV, it's government. It's everything outside programming poor little old me.
Yeah.
Well, that's passivity, isn't it? That's the least, that's not even strength, that's not even courage, that's just simple passivity, and I'm waiting for the leader. Well, that's exactly what Big Brother's hoping that you'll do, because they are the leader. That's how they came into being in the first place. This is a feedback loop. That kind of thinking brought them into existence. It's hardly going to remove them then, is it? In this age or in any other age to come.
Right, yeah, and you've always talked about this as like strengthening an immune system. And I mean, when you're facing any kind of illness or disease or pathogen, you can't just blame that all the time. That's just something that exists in the universe. It's something that exists in nature. If you don't take care of your body and keep yourself healthy, you're going to be overrun with disease. Well, look at the social body. Look at the body of people's minds. And yeah, there are those opposing forces there, but they only exist because we've allowed it to exist, and there hasn't been enough courageous people. There hasn't been enough warriors out there to really bring forward what's needed, not just in a physical sense, but more importantly in a psychological sense.
And the strengthening of the immune system, as you rightly point to, is done in this instance by knowledge, exercising the mind.
Right.
And then you can't, as soon as somebody commits to that, they're sidetracked by saying, well, now I found my clique. Now I'm partisan. I'm with these guys, not you. No, I said knowledge. And knowledge, by the way, is a non-partisan position.
Right.
You can have your favorites. Nobody's telling you not to do that. But all of this going, well, I'm with these guys against them. And this is what happens even in this alternative movement, where everybody is, cliquing up, and that putting limits again on knowledge, which is, again, Big Brother has nothing to fear from that. And the spokesman for Big Brother said that this would happen. They said that the person will divide and conquer themselves. That's the pattern. And that's why real change can't take place, really.
Right. Well, yeah.
We are not, one of the things, as I said, they're not only, as you say, coming down to pick on the small person, but through their education, so-called education systems. And I said this before, and something else, that we're moving not into just a post-humanistic world, but we're moving into a post-psychological world, a post-philosophical world, where they don't even want you knowing about all of these fathers of thought. So the communitarianism, the post-humanism, the global village, when you break that down, what it really means is we are not being children in school, teenagers, people in university. You're not being made privy to the work of these great geniuses, which should be being laid in front of people. That gives you hope. When you know, oh, I look at this guy's work. I mean, we just need to put this in. It doesn't make you feel as bankrupt. So that if you do take away some of the structures that we have today politically, you can easily replace them with something like mutualism, and all of the rest of it. But if you're not exposed to those, and then if the psychologists and the philosophers who've labored to show us what it's all about and where this is all coming from, if we're not being exposed to their work, and we will lack then even the psychic strength and the coordinates to know what to do. And that's what we're doing. We're moving rapidly into a post-psychological world in which psychiatry, no problem. You got that. Drugs, pharmaceuticals, panaceas, bromides. When we went into this in the Archetypes of Control, big Cheshire grins from ear to ear. Soul in the gutter, but I feel fine. I don't feel anymore anyway. It's all been taken away. God bless the overlords. You know what I mean?
Comfortably numb.
Comfortably numb, right? Yeah. And that is what's happening. That you'll have in plenty. And again, that's part of where we're going. But sadly, that means the drug replaces the looking within. So if, the danger to tomorrow is that we'll have not only strengthless people, but we'll have courageousless people. We won't even have. It's part of the self-hate. It's part of the self-loathing, and then that being co-opted by the powers that be, and we'll move into a situation in which our identity will literally be erased. It will just be something, where we are sort of defined by, the logos, the sort of these idiotic, transitory identifications, the car you drive, the clothes you wear, the gap generation bullshit, basically. Nothing original, nothing of your own identity at all is allowed.
And it's so prevalent everywhere when you just look at the state of the mindset of a lot of men out there that aren't really acting like men. They're acting more like, young boys, and even the way they dress, the fad, the whole hip hop culture now. Even the start of the hip hop culture was about rebelling against these types of things. But now it's turned into that, and now it's all about, just putting women in, defeminizing women and demasculinizing men. And you've got men out there that aren't being taught this. They're not being taught true fatherly principles or principles of courage, or how to be how to actually cultivate that courage. They're pretty much just left to be raised by mommy and their mommy's little boy their whole life, and then they put that onto their female counterparts as they grow up, and then that gets translated into their children as they go. And the media is just pumping this image of this fat, uneducated, dumb victim man out there that is just presented everywhere you look. And then now it's all about the strong female taking over, and yet the female is now masculinized. It's not even female anymore. And you got into a lot of these types of things also in the female Illuminati, and I noticed that there was a lot of connections with this card, and you talking about the sun and the sort of Piscean backdrop. There's something going on. Or you've also spoken about sort of the dark side of the sun. I guess this is all sort of a reflection and a reaction to this type of poisonous ideology that's leaking in our society, right?
Yeah, and all of that comes in, whether it's coming in economically, socially, from the family, from the tribe, from the religion. All of this poison comes in because the parents are incapable of bringing meaning from themselves, or making an environment in which the child is able to bring meaning from within itself. The ways that this are done, can differ slightly, but certainly having a lot of animal nature, around a child, so that its curiosity is awakened, its sense of scent. Remember, the olfactory is very important.
Right.
The change of seasons, so that the child is familiar with what nature is doing, not just what mommy and daddy are doing, and all this. Moving on from that to expose it to the great art. I mean, this is all axiomatic, isn't it? The great music, like I said in the program, the great music is there. The art galleries are there, but you have to go there and awaken that questioning, that what's it all about. What that does then is it gives you, before you've even come to coherent answers, at least that gives you the framework in which to see yourself. So subjectivity, all of these concepts of identity, need to be in a frame. The frame is the world. Remember, ecstatic means standing outside yourself. That doesn't mean abandoning yourself, your inner nature. And it certainly doesn't, Heidegger wasn't talking about, standing outside yourself means become a trivial extrovert who's, just going along with the stuff that the world throws at you. Of course, he wasn't meaning that. But what he was saying is that all things that happen within you as a being are articulated in a very deep way with what's out there in the world. And if a child is not even given a snifter of what that is, I mean, they're literally enclosed and incarcerated within a house or a very tight community, which has been the tradition, hasn't it? And then even goes no further than its little niche of religion. We go down to the church, we come back. We're not like them. We're not like these guys. We're over here building all these walls, all of this psychic barbed wire. Then, as I even skipped that and went even to the deeper question of how the actual self gets repressed. In this series, we've not been talking loosely about these things. We've been going into the very core of how the self-deception and the coming in of time. I mean, very deep issues, but, leaving that aside, just the idea that the parents cease to help the child frame its sense of identity, so that you're dealing with a very impoverished, very narrow, very frightened, very, the root is weak. But by say a parent, I've known people that were taken to Chinese museums to see Chinese artwork, before they were 4 or 5 years old or whatever, taken to Arabic, museums to see these incredible books, taken to Egyptian museums to see all of that, exposed to calligraphy, exposed to surrealist art, right? Architecture, walking the streets. Well, we're not just going down to the mall, to get our sausages. On the way, we're going to look at the Art Deco, the modernism, the futurism, the Victorianism, the Edwardianism, the Art Nouveau, right? Jesus Christ, right? That's framing the self. And so what's happening today is because of all of these fearful parents, the hurried lifestyle, as you're saying, this preposterous identification with ludicrously superficial, often, as you're implying, created by the demiurge, or worldly demiurge, created by the Rex Mundi in the political sphere. Go give them that. Manchester United versus Liverpool, right? That's it for that forever, right?
Yeah.
Right. Get the tattoo, right? Or a national identity in a narrow, pathetic way. Waving the flag, you know. You don't even know what it's all about, right? On all this insular, narrow provinciality, not exposed to the great works, you know, not exposed to encyclopedias and dictionaries and the meaning of things. So then the child is bound to grow up by, you know, you have these like moments, 7, 14, whatever, 21. And what happens to an emaciated child like that, psychically emaciated? He needs the father figure, the true identity, whether, you know, he needs that masculine, what are they, you know, the stick that they put beside a plant to make it grow straight, right? That stabilizing force. If it hasn't come from the father and it hasn't come from the mother, then the child will look to the state. He looked to the priest. He looked to the Billy Graham. He looked to the Pope. He looked to a king, a leader, a champion, a military general, right? All of this palaver that we see in our world has these roots of weak, impotent, docile men who are leaning like flabby in their conscience up against the first thing that comes along. And by God, all those satanic mills are just there to generate more bullshit that you can lean up against. And in the end of the day, you now have to defend that stabilizer. You everything you're about is defending the thing that you need to, you know, prop you up.
Yeah.
It's ludicrous. And then few are the people who come along to say, do you not see what the hell is going on here? You know, the real vitality of life, the real questioning. It doesn't even have to be philosophical questioning, just this open awe, just this open sense of wonder that is the root of philosophy, that's the root of art. And so today, you know, you'll only be made into an artist if you've already, you know, got some extremely great skill. It's all been decompartmentalized. Where is the person who can mess around with art, even if he's not a great artist? You don't have to be, you don't have to be a Fabergé to just get your hands mucked into making a pot on a wheel.
Right.
You say, oh, but my kid, he's no good at that. We're selecting what he's going to be good at so he can go to the Juilliard School of Music.
Right.
And we don't care about all the other things. It's just, we were focused in now on the one brilliant thing. He can head the ball, brilliant, let's sign him up. What the hell is all of that?
It's all about their career and their future and all of that, and it's not about their life, you know?
Oh, there's fathers who, before the child, when the child is still in the fetus state, they're asking the doctor, how can I get my son into Harvard?
Yeah.
Give me some points. Yeah. Well, shoot yourself. That's the first point. Because you're going to kill this kid. Forget about getting him into Harvard.
Yeah. I
gave that metaphor one time about, you know, looking out my window back in Ireland and watching the whole fiasco of it, of, I wouldn't call them friends, but mates, people I know, you know, through the years, their fathers and their mothers insisting that this is it. And so they're living an extremely impoverished, sterile life.
Right.
And right there on their faces then, you can see the evil. You can see the they want to twist life. They want to beat their wives. They want to drink. They want to, you know, you don't know what they're doing behind the scenes. So for every little pedophile, for every little, you know, sick sadist, for every compulsive gambler, for every mega alcoholic who's dragging his entire family into the pits, there is a welter of violence has been done to that soul. Strength, yep, they may have that to push, you know, you can fight the other barflies of an evening. You know, out they come at 12 o'clock, there'll be plenty of strength. There'll be plenty, and then the police come along, oh, right, there's plenty of strength. Where's the courage to say, I don't want to live this life. I know something better. I'm going to change. There's a whole world out there. So that framing is very, very vital, and it's a three-dimensional thing. You know, how many children are exposed to the work of Salvador Dali, of M.C. Escher, of Aleister Crowley, of Swinburne, of this person, that person, of Sylvia Plath, right? Of all of the... How many actual individual children have that vast kaleidoscope given to them in a liberal way, you know, that says, you know, I'm just providing all of this. We're not putting a caveat there. You know, there should be exposure to all of these things. And then the child will have a place to frame its consciousness. Oh, I don't like that. It's not for me. And you move on.
Right.
There's something else. And then that is where the real genius emanates from, not looking for one particular rational it's the word I'm looking for, not even skill, it's more like a proclivity, and then just focusing all your money and all your attention onto that. That's good too, to a point, but that can also, emaciate you. It's a form of malnutrition of the soul, because a person may be good at one thing, but they may be good at a lot of different things, and if you cut that off, that's terrible. One must have a whole panoply of different things that they're into, and we're seeing this being reduced and reduced and reduced. And if there's any focus on the child at all, it's because, oh, look, they showed wow, pretty good at dancing, or pretty good at gymnastics, or can climb a wall real good. Let's just focus on that. And that's for the aggrandizement of the bloody parent. It's not for the overall good of the child, you see.
And it also ends up taking the joy away from the child of doing that activity. I've noticed. I've just seen this happen everywhere where, the kid wants to try playing hockey or something, and then the parents take them out, and then the parents become these little dictators in this kid's life, and hockey just doesn't seem that fun anymore. The kid just wanted to go out and slap the puck around with his friends, and now it's got to be all competitive, and they got to show up at the rink at 5 a.m. every morning, and the parents complain about it, but then they force their kid to go, and it's not natural, and like you said, it's not offering any kind of choice. So that child is raised to be led, and those parents, maybe they don't see that they're actually building them into this structure that's being built in our society today, where Big Brother is just going to be like, oh, perfect, great, this guy's already dressed up and ready to go. We're going to sign him up, and we'll put him into some university or into a medical field or whatever, and they'll just be perfect slaves instead of awakened, conscious human beings that have a spark of life in them,
And also have the feeling that, if plan A didn't work for whatever reason, and this happens time and time again, I've got plan B, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
So I've got something, I'm not insecure. So even if you happen to be good at a thing, but some other guy can easily turn up who's 10 times better than you. Did your parents give you the B, C, and D?
Right.
No, they didn't. You're being neurotic now because you'll be tied up in knots now, because the one road that you all thought was going to be the road to go on, that turns out, for there's a number of reasons why this can happen. A good tennis player who hurts his wrist, that's the end of that. A great soccer player who hurts his knee, that's the end of that. But then, are you going to commit suicide? Yeah, most of them do, or they live in a basically a terribly dysfunctional way, a neurotic way. But that was no problem if you've had 2 or 3 other interests that you have that are quite different and all of that. So this eclecticism is very needed. But in the path of the fool, we're sort of jumping over more of those well-known points and trying to get into the bigger questions, that all the things we're talking about now, you need them to be in place first before you can even get to the next level, where the real big questions of what man is, what being is, what time is, what desire is, what divinity is, what the sacred is, should that even be there? Because as I'm saying through the series, if the sacred to you is just a bunch of those stabilizers that keep you from falling apart, then it's shit.
Yeah.
We went mostly into that in the Lover's Card about all this, the Dasein versus the Soulsein, all the false beliefs about divinity, about self, about being, that are basically just props for the weak, docile person who can't stand on their own and ask the questions of their own. And that came up in this card very strongly about the true spirit of Christ. This true spirit is this true spirit of asking those questions, of standing alone, of following the nature's plan. But in order to live the nature's plan, there's a tremendous courage that is required, not just physical strength, but an alignment. You see, it's harder to stay in alignment with the truth, just like in martial arts, to obey those rules, but do it flexibly and still have that level of independence, while at the same time you're sticking near the rule, right? So the bead and the thread have a relationship together, the yin and the yang, right? The strong force and the weak force. Everything's a sine wave in every single thing in the universe, both not just music, but the rising of the tides, the sun, the setting of the sun, the movement of the gravity, of electromagnetism, like Walter Russell and others went into. Every single thing is this wane, the lemniscate, the sine wave, everything. Life and death. We've seen millions of people die. So does the process end just because people die? No, we're going to die. The process will go on for other people. So there's this incredible ebb and flow. In order to be able to get into that level, that's the Tao, that's the Zen, that's way down the line. How can you possibly get into the flow of that? Because it is a flow if you're rigid, and all of society and all the parents and everything have just made you into a block of marble as a being. Then no matter what you do, then all these great sages, Lao Tzu, Bruce Lee, whoever who's taught this other way of being, their words just fall on empty ground, you see. And the seed of this truth, what we're talking about, is in the Christianity. It's right there, but it's been again sabotaged by these priests in black robes who again have tried to, make it one thing and one thing only, and they've thrown away the Dasein. They just imposed the So-sign, and I said that's what everyone wants. I'll walk in your footsteps, I'll drive my chariot in your ruts, and that is automatic, right? It'll be, the car that drives itself. That's where we're heading. Big Brother comes in to say, hey, it's a one-click world, it's a push-button world, everything's going to be from a dispenser, the nanny state, and we will become complete docile bodies, and the wonder and the mystery of life is going to disappear, and we will then end up completely simulacras of what it meant to be human. The only time we'll ever see nature is through a computer screen or a cell phone.
Right.
You can see people on buses today. You can see people on coaches today. You can see people on trains today. I've been all over the world. Has anyone ever looked at that thing called the window? No, they're all on the cell phone. I'm looking and observing. They're all on the cell phone. Oh, hang on.
Yep.
They get a ticket. Comes by the cell phone, right? They're talking, they're texting, and there's the lakes and the trees and the woods. Fuck. So what? Shit. Get me to where I'm going. My destination.
Yeah.
I actually sat on a train. I sat on a train. It was a long journey. We're going to see two friends with me, right? We all had to go on the train, and we had the 4 seats, right? But one was empty. We were just hoping to God that nobody sat there. On the way down, we had no problem. Nobody did, and we were able to spread out, right? No. On the way back, of course, here comes Mr. Suit and Tie, plunks himself down. He's got his laptop out, and we're just like, oh fuck, because there's the end of our conversations. Because if we spoke openly and he heard, he'd be pulling the cord, going, oh, I have to move. These guys are loonies. So that was the end of our, ramblings, right? So he sits there, and believe me, that guy lived on that phone. He was making call after call after call, and just on the laptop and then on the watch, and he never, the entire 3.5 hours, ever looked out the window.
Wow.
And it's just one example.
Yep.
You can see it on airplanes, and now, hey, my kid, he's 1.5 years old, shove that, iPad in front of him, shove that cell phone in front. Again, at that age, you're just putting him in this incubator of technology. That's what I mean. Sitting them in front of big screen TVs and all the rest of it. And nature is just absolutely foreign. And that emaciation, right, by not looking at the mountain, by not looking at the valley, by not looking at the glow of the morning, right, the dew, the wetness, all of it, the river, if you don't see all of those things, then you are emaciating yourself, your own humanness. And we are hurtling towards this post-philosophical, post-psychological world, in which the Jung and the Freud books are even getting harder to find. It's not impossible yet, but I predict in about 10 years, these books will be almost out of print. You'll have to actually be a specialist to even get hold of them. It's happening now. It's in the early stages, but I've been monitoring this for a while. And you're going to find it very, very difficult to even get the collected works of people like Jung and Freud. It won't be probably impossible, but it's going to be much, much harder as we progress. It's already started.
Wow. Yeah, and that's what we're all working hard to try to prevent, at least for some of us, so we can still live a real authentic life here. And just to kind of add a little story of my own, when I came up to do the work with you, when we were visiting, you were there doing some work in Ireland, we were there doing some work, we were like, hey, we'll do the female Illuminati, and we could have just come up, done the thing, took off and left, but instead Chris and I took a few days, we went around and we just saw the history, the beauty. Every day we were putting our boots on, getting up out the door and walking and hiking and climbing and looking at the valleys and the history and the sights and the beauty. And I gotta say, my life has never been the same ever since I got back from that place. Like, it could have just been a work trip. I could have been on the laptop getting everything ready and just go in and get it done. But the whole point was to have an experience and then have that experience translate into the work that we're doing so that it's got more depth and more meaning, because the people doing the work have more depth and more meaning, and they see that. And so, like, this is why, for me personally, I'm getting the hell out of a big city. I'm bringing my kids, and we're living in a place that is just, you walk out your front door and you're seeing water and mountains and valleys and trees and nature just right there. And that's just something that my heart yearns for, because I see what you're talking about, Michael. I see it. I walk out right now. If I walk outside, all these teenagers, they're not even looking up where they're walking. They're walking with their phones. They're all walking in a gang of like 10 friends, and they're all just walking with their phones. And they're not even having conversations. They're not pushing each other into the bushes. They're not, you're not having that organic experience anymore. And so that to me would be an absolute nightmare future if it just keeps going this way. So let's hope that we can inspire some people, you know.
It's been going like this for a long time. I'm one of the only people who keeps reminding people that this is a movement of hundreds of years. All of this move towards the post-humanism is actually a very old story. It's not something that is a phenomenon that's just happened. It's had its incremental, movements down through the years. But yeah, Ireland is a very special place. And even if a person is living in a kind of an urban environment, you'll find that there's even, the kids aren't even taken out to travel to the beach or through the, to the forest. Growing up in Ireland, we were always traveling to this place and that. And so even if you're sort of limited, but at least I was getting to see, sheep on the hillside, different seasons, by being out and about a lot. Today, one parent is working, the child doesn't know what my dad is even doing for work. There's another big missing piece there that we could talk about the missing father, even if there is a father, but then he's out to work. So the child grows up with what is daddy doing? And this is also one of the roots. It's very serious actually, because men like Robert Bly have pointed out that this is actually one of the roots of delinquency, is the simple anonymity of what daddy does. Because you're living in a society, especially post-war society, in which there's an aura of consternation, often unwarranted, that daddy's out there making nuclear bombs. It comes through the liberals, it comes through the left, it comes through the TV, that whatever daddy's doing, he's up to no good. He's out there slaughtering or killing or making bombs, And so the post-war generation had this feeling that daddy's doing some evil, He's working for the World Bank, millions are dying, And so the father, who makes a point of taking his child repeatedly to his place of work, fills in a big blank there, going, oh, wow, that's where daddy is when he's not here. Simple things like that. Or as I say, just driving about aimlessly. Like, like George Carlin said, when do you ever see a kid playing with a stick in the back garden anymore?
Yeah.
Just digging a hole or playing with a stick. The wild man archetype. See, masculinity is made up of many archetypes, as is femininity made up of many archetypes. And we were saying earlier, if those are being cut off, and it's only one cardboard cutout, who's not been exposed to all this fantastic art and the MC Eschers and the Magrittes and all of these kinds of things, we're putting a lot of that artwork into the Path of the Fool. Chris and I are, specifically targeting some kind of artwork for the program, because it's excellent stuff to counterpoint what we're saying.
No, it's beautiful. It looks great. Yeah.
And it has a purpose, because there's that so-called irrational part of us that's deeper. It's that mountain of prior pre-theoretical knowledge that we sit upon. That is again us. That's us. Like ecstasy, right? The whole world is our aura, our Merkaba. It's part of us. There's a constant ebb and flow, a constant rapport between us and what's happening in the world. Even the things that we think are the most private are still responses. Like I said, the door between the hot and the cold world. The door is open and there's a constant interchange. It happens so commonly and it happens so subtly that we forget. And then because of our society's conditioning, this is the super ego, right? We tend to think of ourselves as separate individuals from that stuff that's happening in the world. And this is the bugbear of the modern world, in which, because we're no longer living in rural environments or on farms, we're not privy to the way animals are, we become dehumanized, and we dehumanize the animal life forms. This is why you have these factory farms. That's why you have this endless slaughter, the slaughterhouses and all the evil that entails, the massacres of animals, all because of the desensitization. But we are desensitized. So you can't fix that until you fix the first thing, which is we are desensitized within ourselves. And these are the bigger questions then that make you a critic of society, that show you that I can't live by these rules and will not live by these rules, which again brings us back to the question of courage, because you need courage to stand up to your family and say, look, I'm becoming a vegetarian. My kid is going to be a vegetarian. You what? Facts and statistics say. Yeah. I did it, your granddad did it, and you'll bloody do it. No, I won't, right? So that's like courage, and very few people have that, and we're going to need it more and more and more. And then it's through the model of what you are that real change in the world takes place. So the person who's that model of that courage, the model of these things, who can say, I can run a decathlon and yet I'm a vegetarian. I can pump 200 pounds on the bench, but I'm a vegetarian. All of that thing, will then become a model for other people to say, maybe I have been taught wrongly, right? So it's through your model. But the trouble is that, we are now living in a very, very homogenous situation where the impoverishment mentally, emotionally, psychologically especially, you see, has to be countermanded. That's what my motive was in the tarot Path of the Fool. It's not just to teach people tarot cards. That's one level of it. But I've written a book on that already. I got my mystery school. Why do we go to this level? Because there's so much more meta themes of psychology, of philosophy to bring out, using the tarot as a background to that, so that I can then continue my personal vocation of introducing my public to those great minds. That doesn't mean I'm a follower. Doesn't mean I'm wearing the T-shirt, or thinking this guy's the greatest in the world. I may only like 20% of a guy's work, or 80%. But that doesn't mean I'm a follower. I'm going to say then this is fantastic stuff. The world should know about it. Very important to know about it, because the lies, there's another hand that's telling us lies that is we're believing. They have the millions, to put their stuff on the mainstream. We have the internet, so let's use it, because the other power is not weak. It has tremendous money behind it. They often dip into what people like myself are doing and repackage it, in their own way, which we have to be very savvy about and be wary about, with these Johnny-come-latelys and coattail riders and just magpies and thieves that are, from the mainstream, who are emboldening themselves by cherry picking from us, from this great work, and then presenting it as if they first came up with it. This is happening right across the board, in many, many areas. So we have to be very careful about that. Don't want to go mad about it, but we still have to be aware that there's a lot of co-opting going on, and representing things in a way that's not accurate at all. So there's a work to be done, and we'll get to the Hermit next, and because it's number 9. It'll be summarizing some of the stuff we've gone through as well, although there are really interesting things to say about that. The Wheel of Fortune next, in which there's suddenly now a major transition in the Path of the Fool's life. A lot of people fail to see the tarot as a journey, because when we say the Fool, we really mean the sun itself, right? Going ecliptic, that's the Path of the Fool. So it can't be doubted that the tarot matches that, or the tarot is a comment on that. A lot of people still haven't got that. They go, oh no, the Fool's just the first card. I don't get these people who say that it's any journey of the Fool. That's been made up in recent times. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. The Fool, remember I said in the first card, is Soleil. The word Fool is a corruption of soul. Soleil. So it's the journey of the Fool, right? Through the upper world, the overworld, and the underworld, right? But now we're moving towards cards in which there's a huge change in dynamic. I hinted at it in this card, where there's the sine wave idea that not only at the peak, when he's reaching the highest aspiration, right? You become king, you become prime minister, you become the greatest, sports person or whatever, the greatest scholar. You've been given those rosettes, and you've been given that confetti, and you've been given those awards. But then there's that, the door closes at home, and there's this sort of anticlimax. How well does our society work with that? Why do we often think of that in neurotic terms? Why does that often spur us to more and more idiotic achievements, which aren't really fulfilling? They become addictive then. It's because we don't know how to deal with that trough period, And in the Path of the Fool, and as we all have it in our lives, there are those periods of quiet. There are those periods where, the phone isn't ringing as much, and the pats on the back are just that little bit less, So what?
Yeah.
Those are the fallow periods in which great creativity, right, can come. But if you're always addicted to the highs, actually what you're doing is you're blunting the high, right? And you're actually ending up, you're going to, be suicidal or terribly self-destructive, because now the other person, the crowd, the roar of the crowd has become your master. Not you and your creative process,
That's right,
but the accolades of the herd. Bad. And the Leo, the dark side of the Leo, the dark side of this card, represents that addiction to that roar of the crowd, the addiction to the superficial, trivial, momentary pleasures, right? The compulsive superficiality and extroversion in the wrong way, That doesn't mean you're being close to nature or anything like that. That just means that you now have no meaning within, and you're just letting the crowd or the public or the latest fashion or the latest mode dominate your life. And that's what it's all about, all of those negative connotations of the fire card. And had a man been in that card, had a masculine figure been in the card, probably that would have been all there was to that card. But the artists have decided to say, no, there's something, we're going to emphasize that there's something more to the fire signs. So in Sagittarius, there's a female, right? In the Temperance card. In the Leo card, there's a female. In the Aries card, it's a male, right? But in 2 of the 3, there's a female there. And that's really intriguing and really interesting. But as I said, at that point, the Fool has now realized something crucial. Not just about his own libido, not just about his own battery, but he is the microcosm of the entire universe. What energy does within you, within us, within man and woman, is the same as the universe does. Right. Energy is finite. Energy is finite. It burns out by burning. Whether it's a neutron star or whatever it might be, that thing, like it's like a match that's burning down. I use this metaphor in the post-humanism program in the conclusion, that no matter how many matches you burn, the flame comes and goes. The flame went where? Right? Well, that's where Walter Russell told you it went. Back into the pleroma, back into the aether. But the matter on which it burnt dies out. So it's at this point, charioteer, right? Strength, you're reaching the zenith, you're reaching the highest point, and something you're now going to learn about the metaphysics of energy. And it's absolutely not a lesson that anyone wants to learn, which is, I reach a peak, right? Just like the hermit's on his mountain. And now that area is very small. All this traveling and all this journey to get to a place where I can barely stand.
Yeah.
But this doesn't fit. I should have the universe. But if I move in any direction, I'm going to fall to my death. So what's that about? What is going on? So this theme has been set, you see, in the chariot, the strength, and the hermit, about this paradox that as we walk towards greater and greater achievement, actually something else is happening. We're getting into a cul-de-sac situation, which then again makes us reflect on motives, roots, origins, right? All sorts of things like that. Remember, the desireless state. And so in these 3 cards, they're asking, is achievement merely worldly? And in one way, you can commit to that, as the world is committed to that, and saying, no, it is worldly. You've got to achieve. You've got to test your mettle. You've got to engage. But then I'm playing with the idea that, wait a minute, what about that other ascetic side, which withdraws, which becomes contemplative, which notices these crazy paradoxes about energy and says, well, what's it all about? I get old. My energies become more finite. For all my achievement, there's a feeling of anticlimax. It's not very pleasant. What's that all about? Shouldn't it lead to greater and greater things, you see? So there's this whole other thing. Then we ended with this whole, dip into Gnosticism. And somebody said, well, Michael, I've watched your show. I don't like it. I don't like that ending. Not only if I'm the emperor and I'm the strength, and I am running around and achieving and doing and building and creating and having a ball, but it's Sophia's fallen, rotten, ultimately despiritualized world. What does all my achievement mean? That's right. We got to ask that question. I'm asking. I can't answer it. I don't know. Right? If there's the real spirit of God that created something, and we're not even part of that plan. If the world we're living in and all these weird peccadillos, all this weird contradictory stuff is because it's a fallen world, then that whole question we asked 3 cards ago in the Lovers, which is right? Or no, we actually asked it in the Emperor. Is the striving and the achieving and the clubbing and the building and the fixing and the drilling and all of this achievement, whereas the mystic, is sitting there saying, so shall it be, carry on, right? Yeah. Do they know something we don't know? And could it be that they've worked it all out? I mean, I may be wrong, I'm just asking the question. But if this then turns out to be like we asked the question, if this is ultimately a fallen, despiritualized world in which the cycle of necessity has been orchestrated, and that's it, just procreate, create, right? During the time of ancient Greece, they sat around pulling their hair out, wondering about how are we going to fix our state? What are we going to do about the law? What are we going to do about fixing the architecture and the building? What are we going to do about those colonies that we have and the empires we built? Where are they now?
Right.
They asked all the questions we asked. Where's Rome? Where's Greece? Where's Parthia? Where's Egypt? They had they sweated over it just like we did about slaves and immigration and women's rights and equality and how we're going to free the slaves or whatever bullshit. These are the perennial, they've been doing it for eternity. Where are they now? Where will we be tomorrow? So when somebody stands and looks at this cacophony of stuff, right, and all our solutions, and Is that the mystic then who's sitting there saying, it is all an illusion? Which involves some Gnostics, some religious people, some mystics, there's all different schools, we're not going to talk about that. But just that clear, we know now that there's that clear counterpointing abstention. That abstention doesn't necessarily need to be ascetic, it doesn't necessarily need to be an austere path. I'm not saying that because I don't really think that that is necessarily a good path, but I could be wrong. It might be the way. It might be the person who says, I see it all for what it is. All achievement, the footprint is washed away. There's momentary glamour, then it's over. My achievements are replaced by some other person, right? I have replaced somebody else replaces me. The whole thing is just come and go. It's like the Black Sabbath song, the world will still be turning when you're gone. That's a very ontological, strong point. So what did you do? What did you attain? And then, as you said earlier on, we saw it more in the Chariot card. Behind those masculine drives, behind all of that sense of achievement, is this nebulous, unchartable, almost indescribable, right? It defies reason, it defies words, it can't be delineated, it never will be delineated. Mystery. Where's that coming from? What's that all about? So the Gnostic, as we said, not asserting any personal point of view, but we looked at the tradition, didn't we? And the Gnostic would say, but that nebulousness, I can explain that. That's the abyss that now is existing between you and the true creator. Your creation is the fallen creation, right? Of Sophia, of Lucifer, whatever way you want it. These are just, again, metaphors, right? But that nebulous gap that seems so barren, uncrossable, unchartable, that's just there because you're not in the true realm. You're not in the supernal realm. We are as beings who've fallen out of favor with God's plan, you see. Now, had we been back with it, we'd be able to cross that. We'd find the guide, we'd find the spark that leads us away back out of this fallen world. So there's that paradigm as well. And, we didn't have much time to go into it, but it's one of the most intriguing things. It does connect with the female Illuminati in a way, because this demiurgic force that is the Sophianic, right, is the metaphysical being that they worship. Like in the female Illuminati, we said, who are the beings that they worship? Yeah. If these are physical beings, well, we all know that other physical beings, like the masculine patriarchal side, worship their Jehovah. Does this sisterhood worship? Now, we were already 10 hours into it. There's no way to dig into that. I only could mention it in brief. In this program, we look at it as that's what it's all about. That's why they do what they do here on our terrestrial world, because they actually have either conjured this being or these beings exist, and that's who they worship. That's who they build statues to. That's right. If they're servants of this Sophianic, we can accept that, satanic people have followers, right? Well, that's what I'm talking about. The female sisterhood is nothing but the servants of this demiurgic force. So this can become very, very, very near to us and very political and very meaningful very, very quick, rather than just abstract metaphysics and some bizarre, theology. And at the end of the day, it wouldn't even matter if this was all just conjured by human minds, or it is actually something tangible and real. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because the consequences are the same for us.
Right.
We still need to deal with it. We still need to either serve it or not serve it, align with it or destroy it. And my journey is to destroy it utterly. How do you do that? How do you pull the plug? How do you find the weak spot in the dragon's body? How do you find that Achilles heel? So that's what we're doing. We're exploring this whole thing, because I actually do believe that divination is one of the ways back, throughout the way we're doing it. Some people can come at these occult subjects because they want that sinister power over men, not power to see the truth, but power over other people. That's what these black magicians on both sides have been doing. And often even tarot and astrology divination falls under their hands. But that doesn't mean that those arts themselves are evil. In fact, they're the royal road out of the evil, right? But this is, again, be confused. People don't understand that. And to be more concrete about it, these are the arts that help open up the right brain. In other words, in other language, that we're standing on a mountain. We'll see this in the Hermit card. We're standing on a mountain of pre-theoretical, archetypal wisdom. And how do we open the door to that? Well, science doesn't. Religion doesn't. There's only a few ways to do it. And tarot and divination is one of the ways that we open a very loud rapport with all of that knowledge, so that we then are deeply empowered, with these tools of the trade. The hero is always given wings on his feet, a specific shield, a specific sword or talisman to go forth and fight the evil. He just doesn't plunder in there with his Mars bar. What's it all about? Right? He was awarded, right? He had to pass through other hurdles, tests and obstacles, and then he was bestowed by secret powers, secret weapons. Well, that's what these treasures are, and we still have them. And through these means, they're like mirrors. They help open up the right brain, so we're dealing in a more ancestral wisdom, so that we're not fooled into thinking, well, this fight between good and evil, it just dates from my lifetime, it's just, I'm handling it. What? Before Jesus Christ was born, right? This has been going on. This is as old as you can imagine. This goes right back to the dawn, the fight against evil. How can we be thinking of it in just this insular way, you see? We won't get those unseen powers to help us, so to speak, We've got to open our doors to that force where we understand behind the veil, this kind of conflict has been going on for millennia. Whether it in the end turns out to be just a mental thing, or there is actually, as I say, something tangible to it. These are questions that the neophyte will get solved, get answered as he continues. It's not something one person can make a statement about, because it's both.
It's probably a bit of both, I would say.
It's a bit of both, yeah. It's the shadow behind the curtain, but it's also your perceptions that you're fighting. It's also your own fears. It's also all of your own bugbears that you've got to overcome. It's a lot of different things. But just again, in short, if we are inhabiting Sophia's fallen world, then what the hell are we doing passing bricks to one another to make it secure? So now look at the role of the iconoclast. Look at the role of the rebel. Look what he faces. Because if he works that out and says, yeah, well, I'm not for it. Like I said, in the Bible, they say that Jesus rebuked his mother. You've got to interpret that on a Gnostic front. Well, look what fate waited him then. Because the mother is not as Mary in a stereotypical. He was saying it about the Sophianic. He was saying, I'm not negating the world, because my father's energy made this, and this world can be turned around to right as long as you're back in harmony with the original plan. And then this became the seed of many other teachings that exist in our world, both in a corrupt way and also in a positive way. But again, in a nutshell, if we are in a fallen world that is only a shadow, which is what the Kabbalah shows, right? There's 10 levels of light has descended to make our reality, because our eyes are not acclimatized to the stronger light. It's too blinding for us as we move up. But the journey, Crowley so beautifully wrote about this, and so many of his wonderful works about the princess who wakes up, from her sleep, and then has to go through the mansion, all the different rooms of the mansion in order to find the prince, this kind of thing, or the prince is finding the princess, whatever way you want to look at it. But this is the story of so much myth and legend, so many folk tales, about this great journey. And for instance, remember we actually used it, the Clint Eastwood clip. About Bridge, where a hidden guardian angel comes from the mountain to help Hall, when he's been beaten up by these thugs. What is the item that they use to do the fighting? It's a staff, right, or a pick handle. But in tarot terms, those are the wands. That's why we picked it. It's fire cards, right? Fire in the tarot is wands. So here you have, Clint Eastwood with his axe handle standing for the batons or the wands, the fire signs. Then you have the water signs. Then you have the earth signs, the air signs. So it's the bringing together of 4 different tools, just like you see in the magician card. He's the hermit later on, right? So fool and hermit, magician and hermit. Yeah, it is a path of the fool. There is an actual journey of an individual, a son, child, an ego, identity, a person, a life, a mythos, a whole planet, a whole reality, moving in these stages, which are absolutely fundamental, right? The rites of passage are constant. They're for the child, they're for the universe. Even the gods may have had to go through these stages. That's why these tarot arts are important, because they're delineating, right? They're telling you the 4 levels, the 4 worlds, the 10 subdivisions, right? The 22 arcana. These are all faces of oneself, and they have to be integrated. So it's a tremendous task, encyclopedic look at these 22 cards, and yeah, I think we've been doing really good justice to it. It'd be interesting to move on to the Hermit and the Wheel to see that there's now going to be this almost a reversal, if you will, or what's called in the psychology an antiadromia, a switching over, where sort of the rules and the laws as known so far kind of invert. And this is again a very strong mythic trope that runs through all religious art and all of psychology.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's incredible observation to be able to look at. I was just kind of thinking about what you're talking about, motivation and goals, and how there's this push to achieve and all of that. And we did talk about this earlier about the idea of, stopping to smell the roses and realizing the journey towards a goal is really more about the journey than it is about the goal. The goal is just something to orient yourself. Like if you're on a ship, you don't want to just be out lost at sea. You need some kind of a compass point so you know where you're going. And then you get to the destination, and then what are you going to do? You're going to do your business there, and then you're going to move on to another one. So you need to have a constant drive, goal or no goal. And then there's that more Zen path where it's almost you need that time to have no goal. And the goal is to just recover your strength and contemplate and to think and to just listen and just be more subtle. And when your energy recharges on that kind of the waxing and waning cycle as you're going back up, then okay, there's another goal. Let me put some energy out there and hopefully affect some positive change on the way, experience some life, and then okay, accomplish that goal, good, moving on. But the way we're taught is that it's like going through school. Your goal is to get a career and get a job. And then when you get that job, your goal is to buy the house with the white picket fence and have the family and the whole ball of wax. And then your goal is to retire with some money and then die, I guess. Like that's kind of how, that's all that you're offered, right? Which that's not really life. That's not about, we're not taught about living life. We're not teaching our children how to really get out there and have experience and let the experience be the goal itself, as opposed to just some material thing that really doesn't matter. I always felt that very much when I was doing a lot of competition growing up in martial arts. And it's like I didn't care really about winning medals. I had shoe boxes full of them, and I was just like, whatever, I don't care. I just had fun training, and I had fun testing myself and seeing if I was getting better again. I was testing myself against better opponents and seeing how I was growing. And sometimes I'd win, sometimes I'd lose, but I didn't really care. As long as I enacted my game plan and I got to do what I trained, I didn't care about the result. It's all just points on a scoreboard, so who cares? And I found that I was able to keep my sanity, whereas a lot of other people, when they go into that world in sports, for example, they get so obsessed about being at the top and being the best, and that's all that matters, that they completely lose themselves in the process. And like you said, they become very disenchanted and they become depressed because that didn't produce anything for their soul, So this area is something that I really love bringing out and seeing it brought out more, because now that I'm a father and I've got kids and I see other kids out there, they're not being taught these things. And so I hope that more of this can come forward and we can relate it to children, especially to help them understand so that they don't have those same psychological ails that their parents had, right?
And the experience is very important. See, we're not meant to rebel against the fact, like we saw in the chart, that there's this nebulousness. If the boat is on the water, what are we doing being on the water when we don't know the laws of the water? The goal that you talked about, right, in the metaphor, is where our boat wants to go. That's fine and dandy, and you can perfect that art of just going from there to there blindly and back, forward, without any peripheral awareness of the ocean, the waves, whatever. You just set the thing in motion, it's on automatic, you're doing dutifully your job, and then you live through this life, and that's it. And that will be then, all the trophies nicely aligned on the shelf. But behind it will be that feeling that I really don't know what the hell is going on. I didn't throw away the map. And I certainly didn't learn about that the water has its own goal, which is lack of goal. If I turn the engine off, if I lower the sail, I don't know what this water is going to do. What we have learned is that is dead, or it's not alive, it has no purpose, right? So what my message is certainly go ahead and achieve all the goals. You find out who you are by these things. It's not that you should lay them aside. That's why I'm not particularly convinced about the ascetic way, because then I'm not finding out who I am. If I don't try to paint, if I don't try to do calligraphy, if I don't try to master an instrument, I don't know who I am. There's parts of myself that never come out. Right. So obviously I must strive to do these things, and that does mean setting minor goals. My message is don't become addicted to those goals. Yeah. Like you said, learn about yourself, make it an experience, lift it up, put it down, and if the thing is real, it will hook you, and then it'll take you on the journey. But always be aware. All this is just about awareness. That behind all your achievements is that blank canvas and the mind of the beginner. It's just about being aware of it, reminding oneself all the time about it, so that you blend these two things together. The charioteer can't rid himself of that Neptunian stuff. And in one way, the Neptunian stuff is expressed in one form by the chariot. So that mystery, right, the blank canvas, has chosen these solar moments in order to express one aspect of itself. This was central to what Martin Heidegger's philosophy was all about the fact of the concealedness of being. But at times, just like a weather vane, just like a lighthouse, right, just like the play of light and shadow, there are moments when there's a flicker of light and we get to see a little bit of what being is. But we'll never have that same flicker in that same place, in the same time, in the same way. Heraclitus said that you can't step on the same piece of water twice. There was actually another philosopher who said you can't even step on the same piece of water once. Right? Overemphasizing the fact of the changeability of stuff.
Yeah.
So what we need to do as human beings is this sort of Tai Chi, Zen, Qigong, Aikido thing, which is, as we're riding the horse, as we're setting our navigational coordinates, we're also aware of these other ebbs and flows that either you see them as contradicting your purpose, or we learn over time to say, no, they're not contradicting me. They're different expressions of what I want, and start working with it in a more of a Taoist way. So as I said, it's not that there's an antithesis between, say, the charioteer, willful soul, the rational mind, the ego, the frontal lobes, whatever you want to call it, the drive, the will of the body, the restlessness of man, all of that, and then there's this weird counterpointing, nebulous, antagonistic abyss. No, there's a rapport between these two things. It is from that emptiness that you make the pot, right? Just like in the Taoist Tao Te Ching. Use the nothingness in the clay to have the use of the pot. Use the nothingness in the wall to make use of the window. So it's an ebb and flow, right, between the two things. That spirit, that nether, that noumena, that pleroma is also allowing you to see one aspect of its many faces in that flicker of light, in that flicker of moment. Don't expect it to repeat again. Don't expect to share it with another. They'll have another vision, right? It's a million different things to a million different people. And therefore, although we spoke about the Gnostic, which can drain you of purpose if you think that this is just you contributing to building an unsane world that has its roots in antipathy to God's plan, then don't you see that will undermine your will? That will make you not want to achieve and do anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
It'll rob you of your will. But at the same time, we say, well, then I'm not doing it for that purpose. I'm doing it because now that I am in this world, I can't get out of it. I can't break the mystery of it. As I say, that barbed wire fence, that electric fence, I can't get through that without some very strong, work. I've got to work on myself. I've got to know who I really am. I've got to test the world. I got to push up against it. I got to find out. I got to get to the high place. I got to get to the low place. I have a destiny now, a journey. I'm going to question what is the use of my goals or the goals of all mankind. What's it all adding up to? And I'm going to also see if learning the way of the world by turning off the engines, by turning off the lights, by letting down the sail. Let me see what happens. So are you in control of the beast? The woman is riding the beast. Or does the beast have its own strange rules and laws? In all ancient tribes, there was this moment of walkabout. There was this moment of underworld cycle. There was this moment where the child, the wannabe shaman was put through, some sort of ordeal in which he indeed was thrown over to the role of the animal and thrown into nature, thrown into the darkness. And that's where we're heading in the path of the fool. He says we descend into the autumn and winter months. It's the same thing we're talking about. What do you learn in that nebulous place? And does that contribute to the other syndrome? So as I said, it's not that there's an antagonism. These are two realities in a dance together. And so it's not about making a sort of a neurotic division between those two realities, you know. But the man who doesn't want to work on these things, who's not asking any of these questions, then he will still have in his life all the principles we're talking about, but they'll be faded, right? Because the cacophony of the world, the cacophony of his other limited desires, dull those things. These archetypes still move there. They may be in his life more than, you know, he would even think, in his likes and dislikes, right? In his choice of a partner, and all those rules are still there. And even in the most mundane life, in the most throwaway mundane life, the archetypes are still there. The ritual is still going on, even though it's in a much more depleted and emaciated and faded way. You know, it's like we talk about the cycle of necessity. Sophia's world, the man is just out there at a club, nature, run amok. Oh, I'm going to change that now. I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to build that. Now I'm going to destroy this. And it's just the whole thing we see when we look out at the world. Things being made, things being destroyed, things being achieved, things being not. The whole nightmare of just activity for its own sake. The women who are then just this passive, shell-like, faceless incubators. You know, look at the line she's writing, all those different faces there.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. The multiplicity of her progeny. We already said that the lion was her child. Well, even this beast in the lust card, that's her children. Those are the little faces. Not 5, not 6, trillions of them. She's going to produce 1 million eggs, 1 million realities. There's 1 million stories in the naked jungle, you know, as they say. What the does it have any meaning or purpose? Are we then imposing a meaning upon it, or does it have that authentic meaning? And for many people, it doesn't have an authentic meaning. And you know what happens to them? They go mad. The lunatic asylums are full of sad people like that who saw what I'm saying in 3D and said, I'm checking out of here. They became schizophrenics. It freaks you out. It happens to the best of us. And it's a very thin rope, you know, thin line that you're then walking when you see behind the veil and maybe can't put a meaning to it all. Or the meanings that have been given to you, you know, by religion and other, they're hopeless. Then that person moves more towards then self-destruction, of which there have been so many people, you know, overdosing and just flipping out because they just don't see the meaning. And
I remember feeling like that myself growing up through my adolescent time. I remember feeling a very, very, it was in the period where I was trying to figure out a lot of these things I was taught because I was raised in a very fundamentalist religious background, and I had to answer a lot of these questions, and my soul was just bashing me over the head. And then I go around and I'm not finding meaning, and you're in depression and you're lying around, and you can and here is supposed to be the peak of my life as I'm going into my teen years. I'm supposed to have all this energy and vitality, and it's just getting destroyed, and I just lost my will to live at a certain point. It wasn't until I started facing that darkness and those elements and going on this very path that I was able to start getting my way back out, and then finally reaching this place that I am today. But I felt exactly what you're talking about. I felt that pressure of almost where your mind wants to snap. And thank goodness, you know, I was able to find some good teachers and get inspired again. It was Joseph Campbell was one of the first books I started reading, and I started reading the Tao Te Ching, and I started looking at things differently, and I said, oh, there's something more to explore. I don't have to give up quite yet, you know. So hopefully the work we're doing, Michael, and with this kind of information and this Path of the Fool series and the other projects we're working on, can be another way to help inspire people to go on this journey and to not give up hope, but to really bring some kind of meaning into the world, you know.
Well, they have to bring it from themselves. That's what this whole path is about. You know, don't wait for the world to turn you on. Try to get through all those layers. Hopefully, with the help of parents, it would be really good. But you can do it on your own. The solution is you can do it on your own. The man who runs into the neurosis is the one who's perpetually waited for the world to turn him on, not realizing that sensational world is limited. It's a limited palette. In the early days, it looks like there's a lot of stuff going on. But actually, it's very limited. It's a limited paddock.
Yeah.
And you can sit in different corners, but in the end, it's going to become insipid. And then when it does, and that's usually about the mid-20s to late 20s, when people have done it all, you know, if I've seen it, I've done it kind of thing. And then they feel insipid because life can feel very meaningless at that point. That's because they've missed out one single little fact, and that is meaning is not in the world, it's in you. It's up to you to turn the wheels to bring meaning from within. And if you don't do that, then you're in a serious, you will move from neurosis probably to psychosis or to complete some other dementia because, yeah, you have a wrong contract here, you know, you definitely have. And you have to learn then that what you made the mistake of thinking that the external world and external people and other interactions with them is going to be the source of a deeper sense of meaning within yourself. That's wrong. You have to turn it around and create a new relationship with the phenomena, and that's what in this path of the fool we're also dipping into, so people can see the validity of that. You just can't make that statement and then, it's too big a statement to make to accept that people will accept it right away. So we're going to try and prove the point by mulling over and investigating and also re-investigating. I'm all about re-envisioning, re-looking, re-studying, not just once, but going over it again. This is very key in my life, not just present one thing one way, it's always done, we've explained it, it's done.
Yeah.
No, life is so much more about do it again, try it again, like a producer goes, no, it wasn't right, play it again. Martial arts, no, not quite right yet. Your feet weren't quite on the ground there, let's do it again,
Yeah.
And a lot of our life is replaying, and it's good, it's okay, that's practice, and practice does make perfect in the end.
And as you were finishing up that episode 8, you were really getting into this very deeply about self-knowledge being the way out of this nightmare that we see both internally and also socially, asking the deeper questions about the mysteries of life, about yourself and about the universe. This is going to keep you on the path. It's going to keep that enchantment, that mystery, that spontaneity, and it's going to build your courage as you go. I've just noticed this personally, that my own personal courage has gone from 0 to hero just because of the fact that it was a choice that I made to go within and kind of get rid of all the cobwebs and really try to build up again and be inspired and find meaning and create meaning. Mm-hmm. And that's where you're going to find the courage. I find the people that lack courage, they also lack experience in the world. They lack they lack that ability to look at the birds as they fly by, or to just notice those things, or notice those buildings and that artwork. They don't have that, and so therefore they're just very, very they're very small inside, and that's why they can't bring that courage forward. So bringing this out is very, very important for individual development of if you're building a family, if you're the father figure in your family and you're representing that solar energy in the family unit, you have to bring that and teach that and lead by example, and bring the best out of those kids as you're raising them, and set those good examples, right?
Yeah, and don't strap them down and in. So that they can't express. The courageous person is because they've never had a moment to flex that muscle.
Right.
Everything's been delineated, circumscribed by the parent. So there's no contribution of the senses. There's no contribution of reason. There's no contribution from the child, because everything has been pre-positioned, pre-explained. Right from even falling down or touching an animal in the street, or as I say, playing with a stick, or doing all these things that kids used to do so that they could learn. In Ireland, we played in the sewers, for fuck's sake. We were right down. That was it. Things that would be considered horrific today.
Yeah.
But this makes you into someone. And today we have this completely different, this shrink-wrapping attitude towards children, and the inability to let them off the lead. And it's phenomenal. You shouldn't even get me started on it, because I see it all the time and I absolutely loathe this behavior. Oh,
it's
my
hyper
God.
sanitized. It's like let's nerf everything and pad everything and blockade everything, and like, oh my God, the kid fell down and they're crying, so let's make a big deal out of it and get them used to having that kind of attention every time they bump a knee or bump their elbow or something. Like, my goodness, these kids gotta toughen up and live life.
Yeah. And then they can't. How can they feel courage? How can they feel strength when they haven't even been grounded?
Right.
There's nothing there constitutionally. And as we move towards this post-human nightmare, that's what it means. We are losing those very human traits of curiosity, of ability to touch and know a thing for what it is, because we're being shielded and protected and shrink-wrapped. It's awful. And it's happening all through the school system right now, where almost those normal needs and normal drives to learn are almost being considered taboo.
Right.
That they're being considered an aberration. Yeah, it's awful, really awful.
Oh yeah. Well, we are really hoping to turn it around. And for those that are watching, if this is the first interview you've seen or aspect of the Path of the Fool, you have to go and watch the entire series. You can get it on Michael's channel, Unslaved TV, and you can check it out at his website, michaeltsarion.com. I encourage you to watch the cards, bit by bit, whatever you got to do, and then go and check out the interviews that we've done afterwards, because it's a great place where Michael and I have been able to really pull and tease out some of these different concepts, and we're going to continue to do it. And Michael, you said the next card is the Hermit, so we're definitely looking forward to that. And we'll set up some following interviews as well to really bring forward this next level of this path.
Great, thanks for the time to share these other very, very important points. It's not so easy in the show to have these, diversions and digressions. So these are perfect interviews for that. And we'll move on through the series.
Excellent. Well, the honor is mine, and we'll definitely hook up again, and we look forward to the work you're bringing forward. And thanks to those that are watching, those that have supported. We've gotten lots of incredible feedback, Michael, on the Path of the Fool. We're getting good emails and interactions on Facebook. People are loving it. And even the people that are challenging it and having issues with it, that's healthy too, because that's showing that there's a process of thinking going on. There's a process of questioning. And that's the whole point here. So whether you agree, disagree.
Don't take my words for anything. Don't, I'm not an expert. I'm not right in everything. I'm not even asserting a point of view. We're just diving in at a certain point and then seeing what comes up, so to speak, and not trying to, again, limit it to one perspective. It's all about compare and contrast all the way through and see what sort of themes are running through it. It's an adventure and it's an exploration, but it's not me asserting any one point of view. That's not what this is all about.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. And it's good to see. And that's really, I think, what's going to help heal also this alternative research community, where all it is about asserting views, and it comes from a place of fear and competition and ego in a way. And yet it should just be about the knowledge and the information. It should be a journey of discovery, as you've said. And that's why I've always very much respected your work. And I think that this is kind of the mindset we need to have as we face even the challenges that we're coming up to, and we're revealing these great secrets in all levels. We have to keep, like you said, turning it over, looking at it again, exploring it. This is an exploration after all. And we got to really also remember to live life to its fullest. This is what it's about. You can't live life to its fullest if you're a victim to the world. You really have to find that courage and bring something of your own into the world. So with that, Michael, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to when we can hook up again.
We'll talk soon. Thanks, David.
Excellent.